Salam and peace. Welcome to Dawadoot. Today I'm presenting this short clip from the interview. Brother Mohammed Hijab interviews Dr. Bart Ehrman on IslamNet. You can subscribe to IslamNet channel. There's a lot of great video there, and the entire interview is on IslamNet. So let me play this short clip. I thought it very interesting. According to Bart Ehrman, his research, he found that the historical Jesus was not divine, which is very close to what Muslim believes. So let me play for you.
Historical perspective. Like without faith, it's not that you're a Christian or anti-Christian or some other religion. It's just like, just historically, how would you go about showing if Jesus thought he was God? And I think actually historians can say something about this that will be surprising to a lot of people.
So what is, from once again reading a book misquoting Jesus and other things, my understanding is that your conclusion is that Jesus Christ was a messianic prophet, right? That at least that's what he claimed he was, not a god or necessarily the Son of God, but not a god. To what extent is that a true representation of your beliefs?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the New Testament that Jesus does claim to be God in the Gospel of John, yeah, which is our final gospel. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the historical Jesus considered himself to be a divine being at all. I think he thought that he was a son of God in the sense that he was specially chosen by God, and that I think Jesus really did think he was going to be the Messiah, the future deliverer, the future King of Israel. That is, after all, why they crucified him for saying that he was the King of Israel. And so I think that that's historically right. But that the Messiah was not supposed to be a divine figure. The Messiah was a human, and prophets were humans. And Jesus certainly understood himself as a prophet and as a teacher and probably as the Messiah and a son of God in the sense that other people were sons of God. I mean, the King of Israel was the son of God. He's called the son of God. And priests were sometimes, or prophets, they could be called the son. And so I don't think that Jesus thought that like he existed before he was born or that he was born of a virgin. I don't think that any of that's probably right.
Well, what I've read from you and also heard from you in some lectures and debates and also in your books is that you differentiate between the Gospel of John, as you just have now, which is obviously the latest edition, and then obviously the Synoptic Gospels as well. And you make this case, from what I remember from reading your books, that there has been a development to a higher Christology. And in John, as you've mentioned, it seems like the author of the Bible, you mentioned, believes that Jesus is actually divine, but that in the Synoptic Gospels, we're talking about Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this is less prominent. Can you tell us a bit more about that development?
Yeah, so what I would say is that these four Gospels are all distinct from one another. They all have their own message, their own perspective on Jesus, and it's not necessarily that these perspectives are at odds with each other or contradictory. I mean, I think Matthew and Luke have very different views of who Jesus was, but they're not necessarily contradictory. But I do think that John stands out as they're all different, but John is probably the most different, and pretty much for the reason you're saying. My view is that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and as your listeners know, they call those the Synoptic Gospels because they're so similar. They tell many of the same stories. Sometimes they tell them word for word the same. And so you can put them in columns next to each other and read them together because you can see them together. So that's what synoptic means. You can see them together. John has a whole different set of stories. And I think that all of these gospel authors, I think all of them think that in some sense Jesus is God. But it's only in the Gospel of John that Jesus goes around saying things like, I and the Father are one, or before Abraham was, I am, or if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. These are quite amazing statements. But from early on in Christianity, Christians knew that John was different, and they usually called it the spiritual gospel, because rather than kind of the nuts and bolts of what he was doing in his life, it's more theologically oriented. And that's a view that scholars today confirm, and that I agree with. It does, though, and I think it's extremely valuable to Christians as a theological expression of who Jesus is. But my question is it historical in the sense that is this the kind of thing Jesus was saying about himself?
Yes, and the point that you make also in some of, once again, I'm referencing you a lot here because obviously we've consumed a lot of your material, and I advise a lot of people to do the same. I think your books are very lucid, very well written, very well